crowbar slipped on the rotten board and split her palm wide open. Blood ran down the handle before she even noticed the pain. She had come to this workshop to gut it for scrap by sundown. $5. That was what the probate clerk had written on the inheritance line. A man dies alone above a crumbling shop and leaves his only niece a building worth less than a sandwich. She wedged the bar back under the next plank and pulled. Wood screamed. Dust rose. And then she saw the corner of a tin box buried in the dirt below. Sealed with wax. Heavier than it should have been. She did not know it yet, but the man her family had called a thief for 11 years had been waiting for this exact moment. Why would a broke uncle hide something under his own floor? Stay with me on this one. The town she drove back into that morning was the kind of place where the diner still served pie on chipped saucers, and the same 6 men sat at the counter every dawn arguing about a steel mill that had closed before half of them retired. 43 minutes east of the interstate. 2 stoplights. A water tower with the year 1962 painted on the side in a color that used to be blue. The niece had grown up here. She had also spent the last 11 years trying not to come back. She was 29 now. Tired in the way that waitresses get tired when the tips are bad, and the rent goes up anyway. Her hands were rough from carrying plates, and her hair was pulled back in the same brown elastic she had been wearing for 3 days. She drove a sedan with one hubcap missing, and a check engine light that had been on since spring. The probate letter sat on the passenger seat. She had read it 9 times. The letter said her uncle had passed away 2 weeks earlier in the apartment above his carpentry shop. He had been found by the mailman after the smell came through the door. He had no children, no wife, no siblings who would claim him. Her father, his only brother, had refused the call from the coroner. So the court had moved down the family tree until it landed on her name. Sole heir. The clerk had written the assessed value of the property at $5. 5. Just enough to make the inheritance legally binding under state law. Just enough that she could not refuse it without paying a filing fee she did not have. She had laughed when she read that part. Then she had sat on the edge of her bathtub and cried for 20 minutes without knowing why. She had not spoken to her uncle in 11 years. Not one phone call. Not one Christmas card. The last time she had seen him was at her grandmother's funeral when she was 18 years old. He had stood at the back of the chapel in a suit that did not fit him, and her father had walked right past him without nodding. On the drive home, her father had said the word thief out loud, and her mother had stared out the window and said nothing. After that, the family stopped mentioning him. His name became one of those names that empties a room. By the time the niece moved out for community college, she had almost convinced herself he did not exist anymore. Now she was driving toward his shop with a crowbar in the trunk and a plan to strip the place for whatever copper and tools she could sell by Friday. The workshop sat at the end of a gravel road behind the old feed store. 1 story. Cedar siding gone gray. A tin roof that had given up on being level somewhere around the second Reagan administration. There was a hand-painted sign above the door that read REVS Carpentry in letters that had once been read. The R was almost completely faded. She stood in the driveway for a long time before she opened the door. The inside smelled like sawdust and pipe tobacco, and the kind of cold that settles into wood when no one has run a heater in 2 weeks. There was a workbench along the back wall with a half-finished cradle clamped to it. Tools hung on pegboards in the shape of their own outlines. A coffee mug sat on the windowsill with a dried ring at the bottom. Above the shop, up a narrow staircase, was the one-room apartment where he had lived for 30 years. She climbed it slowly. The bed was made. The blanket was folded. A photograph sat on the nightstand of a woman she did not recognize, dark hair, summer dress, smiling at someone behind the camera. She picked it up. The frame was warm from a patch of sun. She set it back down exactly where it had been. It was the workshop floor that stopped her. The boards in the center of the room were sagging in a pattern she could not explain. Not from water. not from rot evenly. They sagged in a square, roughly 3 feet by 3 feet. She got down on her knees and ran her hand across them. One of the nails was missing. She went out to the trunk for her crowbar. She wedged it under the lip of the first plank. She pulled. Believe me, she was not expecting anything. She thought maybe rats. Maybe a forgotten toolbox. The plank came up with a long dry crack, and the smell of old earth rose into her face. She lifted the next one. And the next. And then she saw it. A tin bread box. The kind grandmothers used to keep on top of the refrigerator. Red lid. Faded floral pattern on the side. Sealed all the way around with a thick line of yellow candle wax. She lifted it out of the dirt with both hands and set it on the workbench. It was heavier than it looked. She did not open it right away. She stood there breathing in the dust and thinking about every story her father had ever told her about the man whose floor she was standing on. The man who supposedly emptied the family savings account in 1998. The man who supposedly drove her grandmother to her grave with the shame of it. She did not believe in ghosts. She believed in evidence. And there was a sealed tin box in front of her that someone had taken the time to wax shut and bury under a floor. She got a putty knife from the pegboard. She slid it along the seam slow and even. The wax cracked in long brittle strips. The lid lifted with a soft hiss, like the box had been holding its breath since before she was born. Inside were 3 things. A leather-bound journal stained dark along the spine. A bundle of envelopes tied with white string, the top one addressed in her mother's handwriting. And a small brass key on a paper tag with a number on it that she did not recognize. She sat down on the floor right there in the sawdust. Her hands were shaking. Now here's the thing. She had not seen her mother's handwriting in 7 years. Her mother had been dead for 6. She opened the top envelope first. The paper was thin. The date in the corner was March of 1998. The letter was addressed to her uncle. It started with the words, "I am writing this because I cannot say it out loud, and your brother is in the next room." The niece read the first paragraph twice, then a third time. Then she set the letter down on the bench and pressed both hands flat against the wood and waited until her breathing slowed down. Her mother had written this letter when the niece was 8 years old. Her mother had written it in secret from inside her own kitchen. Her mother had been trying to tell her uncle that her husband was the one who had emptied the account, that she had seen the withdrawal slip in his coat pocket, that she was afraid of what he would do if she said anything in the open. She was begging him to wait. She was promising she would find a way to fix it. She had signed it with only her first initial. There were 47 letters in that bundle. The niece counted them later. 47 over 11 years. Every one of them was her mother writing to her uncle the way you write to someone you trust with the worst thing you know. Some were 1 paragraph long. Some were 5 pages. The handwriting got tighter as the years went on. The last one was dated 3 months before her mother died. It said, "I am sorry. I am sorry for all of it. Please do not let her grow up thinking you were the one. Please." The niece read that last line out loud in the empty workshop, and the sound of her own voice scared her. She did not open the journal yet. She was not ready. She closed the bread box and carried it up to the apartment and set it on the kitchen table. She made herself sit down. She made herself drink a glass of water from the tap. The water was cold, and it tasted like copper pipes. She watched the late afternoon light move across the linoleum. She listened to the gravel road outside and the wind in the cedar siding, and she let herself understand, slowly, that everything she had been told about her uncle for 11 years had been a lie told to her by the man who had benefited from it. Her father. The thief had been her father. She drank the rest of the water. She sat down on the kitchen chair. She did not cry yet. That would come later. Now here's the thing. The trigger came 20 minutes after that. She heard a truck on the gravel road. She heard it slow at the bend and turn into the driveway. She heard a door slam. She heard boots on the wooden steps that led up to the workshop door. And then she heard her father's voice calling her name through the floor. He had not called her name in 11 months. The last time he had spoken to her was on the phone after her mother's anniversary, and he had been drunk and he had hung up first. She knew the sound of his voice the way you know the sound of a door that has been slammed at you all your life. She froze. The bread box was on the kitchen table behind her. The letters were spread out across the workbench downstairs in plain view. She came down the stairs slow. He was already inside the workshop. He was standing in the middle of the room, looking at the hole in the floor. He was holding a manila folder in his left hand, and his face had gone the color of wet cement. He looked up when he saw her. He tried to smile. The smile did not work. He said, "Hey, kiddo," in a voice that was supposed to sound casual and sounded instead like a man who has been running for a long time. He said he had heard she was up here. He said he had been worried about her. He said he wanted to help her sort out the property because these things can get complicated and she did not need the stress. While he was saying all of this, his eyes kept going to the workbench, to the letters, to her mother's handwriting. He did not know yet that she had seen what was inside. He hoped she had not. She asked him what was in the folder. He hesitated for half a second. Hold on to that detail. He hesitated. Then he said it was nothing. Just some paperwork he had been working on. Just a buyer who had reached out to him about the lot because his brother had mentioned wanting to sell before he passed. The niece felt the floor underneath her tilt. Her uncle had not mentioned wanting to sell. Her uncle had been working on a cradle the morning he died. She asked her father when his brother had mentioned this. Her father said a few weeks back. The niece looked at the date stamped on the corner of the folder through the manila flap. She could see the edge of it. The contract had been drafted 3 weeks before her uncle's death. 3 weeks before. Her father had brought a buyer's contract to the workshop 48 hours after probate notice landed in her mailbox. The contract was for $14,000 cash. The signature line was already filled in with her uncle's name in handwriting that did not match anything on the bench behind her. This is where it turns. She did not say any of that out loud. Not yet. She told her father she needed a minute. She told him she had to use the bathroom upstairs. She climbed the staircase one slow step at a time. She locked the apartment door behind her. She took the bread box off the table and put it inside the oven and shut the oven door. She picked up the journal. She sat on the edge of her uncle's bed. She opened it. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these. The first entry was dated 1970. He had been 20 years old. He had been writing from a field hospital in the central highlands of Vietnam, with shrapnel in his right leg and a letter from his mother in his lap. The handwriting was careful and small and a little shaky. He wrote about a man in his unit who had died the night before. He wrote about the way the air smelled after a monsoon. He wrote about his younger brother back home, 15 years old, who had written him a letter promising he would never let the family down. The niece read that line and put the journal face down on the blanket and stared at the wall for a long time. Her father had been the younger brother. Her father had made that promise. She picked it back up. She skipped ahead. 1973. Her uncle came home and bought the workshop with his service pay and started building cradles for couples in town who could not afford the catalog ones. 1978. He met a woman. Dark hair. Summer dress. The photograph upstairs. They were engaged for 2 years, and then she died of a brain aneurysm at 26. He did not date again. 1985. His younger brother got married. The niece's father. The niece's mother. The wedding was held in the workshop because they could not afford a hall. Her uncle had built the arch they stood under by hand. He had carved both their names into the wood. He had been the best man. 1998. The page she had been waiting for. He wrote it the night it happened. He had come home from a job in the next county and found the back door of the workshop kicked in. The cash box from his bottom drawer was gone. $41,000 he had been saving for 18 years. His entire life savings. He called the sheriff. The sheriff filed a report. 2 days later, his brother came over with a story about a stranger he had seen near the shop. A story that did not match what the sheriff already knew. His brother was sweating when he told it. His brother was wearing a new watch. His brother had used the words "I would never" to him so many times in one conversation that he started counting them. He counted 7. He did not say anything that night. He waited 2 weeks. Then he went to the bank. The teller remembered his brother because his brother had cashed a $41,000 check with a forged signature, and the teller had asked him twice if he was sure he wanted the whole amount in hundreds. His brother had been sure. He wrote the next entry the night he made his decision. He wrote that he was not going to press charges. He wrote that pressing charges would put his brother in prison, and his sister-in-law would be left with a child and no income. He wrote that he was not going to do that to her. He was not going to do that to her daughter. He wrote that he would carry the cost himself. He would let the town call him a thief. He would let his brother repaint the story, whatever color his brother needed to paint it. But he would not stop watching. He would not stop saving. And he would not stop writing it down. The niece read that paragraph 3 times. Her uncle had known. He had known for 26 years. And he had chosen silence because he loved a woman who had once written to him in secret from her own kitchen. There were 304 entries after that one. She did not read them all that afternoon. She read enough. She read the entry where he opened the savings account in her name in 2004. She was 8 years old. He had put in the first deposit on her birthday in cash, $200 he had earned from a porch railing. She read the entry from 2007, where her mother had walked into the workshop carrying a paper bag with $3,000 in it. Her mother had been skimming household money for 9 years. She had brought every cent of it to him. He had put every cent of it in the account. She read the entry from 2012, where her mother had been diagnosed with the cancer that would kill her 4 years later. She read the entry where her mother had asked him to promise. Promise that if anything happened to her, he would tell the niece himself. Promise that he would not let her grow up believing the wrong story. He had promised. And then she read the final entry. It was dated the morning he died. 2 weeks ago Tuesday. The handwriting was slower than the rest. The pen had skipped twice. It was addressed to her by name. It said this: "My darling girl, I have been writing to you in this book for 21 years without knowing your face the way I wanted to know it. Your mother told me what kind of woman you were becoming, and I believed her. There is an account at the Savings and Loan on Maple Street in your name. The key is in the box. Please understand that I waited because I needed you to find this on your own. I needed you to see the floor. I needed you to lift the boards yourself. Otherwise, you would not believe it. The money is yours. The shop is yours. The truth is yours. I am sorry I never got to bake you a birthday cake. Your Uncle Walt." She closed the journal. She put it on the bed beside her. She did not move for a long time. She listened to her father pacing the workshop floor below her. She listened to him pick up the letters on the workbench. She heard him exhale when he saw the handwriting. She heard him say her mother's name out loud in a voice she had never heard him use before. He had not expected the letters. He had expected a journal he could destroy, and a workshop he could bulldoze, and a niece he could talk into a $14,000 contract she would sign because she was tired and broke and did not know any better. He had not expected the letters. She went down the stairs. He was standing at the workbench. The letters were in his hands. He looked up at her with the kind of face a man wears when he has just realized that the room he is standing in is not the room he thought it was. He started to talk fast. He started to say things about how her mother had been confused at the end, about how the brain does things you cannot trust when a body is sick, about how he had loved his brother, about how this had all been a misunderstanding that he could explain if she would just let him explain. She let him talk. She did not interrupt. While he talked, she walked past him to the workbench. She picked up the brass key. She held it up between two fingers so he could see it. She told him she was driving to the savings and loan in the morning. She told him she was going to open the box that key fit. She told him that whatever was in that box belonged to her and not to him, and that if he tried to come within 100 yards of that building, she would call the sheriff, and she would hand the sheriff the bundle of letters in her mother's handwriting and the journal in her uncle's handwriting, and the bank teller's name from 1998. She told him she was 29 years old and she was done. He stared at her. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked down at the folder in his hand with the forged contract inside it. He set the folder on the bench. He did not say goodbye. He walked out the door and the screen banged shut behind him, and she heard his truck start, and she heard the gravel under the tires, and she heard the sound get smaller and smaller until it was gone. She locked the workshop door behind him. She sat down in her uncle's chair at the workbench. She let herself cry then. She cried for the man whose face she had not seen in 11 years, and whose handwriting she had just spent 4 hours reading. She cried for her mother, who had been writing letters in secret from a kitchen that was supposed to be safe. She cried for the 8-year-old girl, whose birthday cake had been baked in a workshop she had never been invited to enter. She cried until the light outside, the windows went orange and then gray. Then she wiped her face on her sleeve, and she got up, and she put the bread box back together. She wrapped the journal in a clean rag. She tied the letters back up with the same white string. She locked them all in the trunk of her car. She drove to the only motel in town, and she paid for a room with cash, and she did not sleep. She was at the savings and loan when the doors opened the next morning. The teller was an older woman who had worked there for 31 years. The teller recognized the key the second she saw it. She walked the niece back to the vault herself. She did not ask any questions. She unlocked the outer cage, and the niece signed the card, and the teller pulled the long flat box out of its slot and set it on the table in the small private room. She closed the door behind her on the way out. The niece sat alone with the box for a full minute before she opened it. Inside were 3 things. A bank book with 21 years of deposits in it, every one of them dated, every one of them in her uncle's hand. The total at the bottom of the last page was $96,418. A second envelope from her mother. And a photograph. The photograph was of the niece at 8 years old, standing in front of a birthday cake on a workbench that the niece now recognized. She did not remember the picture being taken. She did not remember the cake. She did not remember being in the workshop. But there she was, smiling at the camera. And in the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was a man's hand on her shoulder. Her uncle's hand. He had been there. He had baked her a cake. Someone, almost certainly her mother, had brought her there in secret on her 8th birthday, and he had baked her a cake, and she had been too young to remember it. She turned the photograph over. On the back, in pencil so faint she had to tilt it toward the light, was a single line. 3 words and a date. She is ours. June 14th, 2004. The date was her 8th birthday. The handwriting was her uncle's. She put the photograph down on the table. She put both hands flat over her face. She did not cry. She had stopped being able to cry an hour earlier. She just sat there breathing into her palms and feeling something rearrange itself in the center of her chest. A child who had been told her whole life that one branch of her family had stolen from the other. A child who had been told the wrong story so many times it had become the only story. And on the back of a photograph from her 8th birthday, in pencil, in the handwriting of a man she had been taught to be ashamed of, were 3 words that had been true for 21 years without her knowing them. She is ours. She read the second letter from her mother last. It was short. It was dated the week before her mother went into hospice. It said this: "If you are reading this, you have already found him. He kept his promise. I could not keep mine. I was a coward, and I am asking you to forgive me for it. Take what he saved. Build something with it. Do not let your father near it. I love you more than the cost of telling the truth, which is why I never told it. I am sorry." The niece folded the letter back into thirds. She put it in her coat pocket. She put the bank book in her purse. She walked out of the savings and loan into the white morning light. She stood on the sidewalk, and she breathed in cold air for the first time in 11 years that did not feel like it was rationed. She did not go back to the city. She went back to the workshop. She spent the next 4 months learning how to use her uncle's tools. The cradle on the workbench had been ordered by a young couple in the next county. She finished it for him. She delivered it herself. The young mother cried when she saw it because the rockers were carved with songbirds the woman had not asked for, and her uncle had carved them anyway because that had been his way. The niece took the next order, and the one after that. She did not advertise. The town did the advertising for her. She used the money from the savings and loan to fix the roof and replace the floorboards and put a sign over the door that read REEVES Carpentry in letters that were the same red her uncle had painted 30 years ago. She did not press charges against her father. Not because she forgave him. Because her uncle had not wanted that, and she was going to honor the man who had honored her mother. She did write him one letter. She mailed it to his last known address. It said this: "You are not welcome here. You are not welcome at the shop. You are not welcome at any holiday. If you try to contact me, I will give the journal to the sheriff, and I will give the letters to the local paper. I am keeping the shop. I am keeping the name. I am keeping the truth. Do not write back." He did not write back. He moved out of town 6 weeks later. She did not ask where he went. She kept the bread box on the shelf above the workbench. She kept the journal next to it. She kept the photograph of herself at 8 years old, the one with her uncle's hand on her shoulder, in a frame on the windowsill where the coffee mug used to sit. On the first anniversary of his death, she baked a cake on the same workbench where he had baked one for her. She lit one candle. She did not blow it out. She let it burn all the way down. The wax pooled on the wood. She did not wipe it up. It is still there. You can see it under the new finish if you know where to look. She knows where to look. And every morning when she unlocks the workshop door and the smell of sawdust and pipe tobacco rises up to meet her, she says good morning to a man she never got to thank, and she gets to work on the next cradle. Believe me, he hears her.